Napa County, California, 6:03 p.m. Gavin Hale's phone vibrated against his ribs inside the pocket of his dark security jacket. He stood motionless at the end of the long glass hallway in the Vantage Ridge Administration Building, eyes tracking the cluster of executives leaving the boardroom. Their faces carried the familiar tightness that came after hours of arguing over money. Gavin had learned long ago how to become part of the wall-present, useful invisible. No one ever remembered exactly when he had started standing there. He slipped the phone out. One line, no greeting, no emoji, just the words, "I baked cookies. Come over." The sender's name sat above the message like a warning. Sabrina Vale. Everything in Gavin tightened at once. Sabrina did not send casual texts. She was the CEO of Valecrest Vineyards, the woman whose name made bankers sit straighter and rival growers check their numbers twice. Everything about her had purpose. The steel gray suits she wore to meetings, the single pause she took before answering a difficult question, the way she never wasted a single word. If Sabrina Vale wrote, "I baked cookies, come over," it meant she needed him right now. And did not want to type the real reason. Gavin glanced at the wall clock. 6:03. He did not say goodbye to anyone. He did not ask permission. He grabbed the keys to his old pickup, killed the monitor feed, and walked out. As he passed the night shift desk, the supervisor called after him. "Hale, where you headed, emergency." He did not turn around. 10 minutes later, he was driving the winding hill road that led to her estate. The sunset poured gold across the long rows of vines that spilled down the valley like a slow river. The beauty of it almost looked fake, and that perfect quietness put him on edge. Years of security work had taught him one simple rule: when a place looked too peaceful, at the exact moment it should not something dangerous was hiding behind the calm. Gavin had done many things before the uniform. Military police, a small house in Sacramento, a wife who liked to leave the kitchen door open so the morning light could pour in, a little girl named Lila. Then the accident took Naomi on a rainy highway while she drove out for fever medicine for their daughter. After that, his life had narrowed to two things: work and fatherhood. No room left for new risks, no room for new ropes around his heart. At least that was what he kept telling himself. He turned onto the private driveway that climbed to Sabrina's house. The headlights swept across the stone steps. The front door stood open just a crack. Not wide, not welcoming. Just wide enough to say someone inside had opened it, and then either could not or would not close it again. Gavin killed the engine, but did not slam the door. He walked up the steps, slowly listening before he touched the handle. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere far off, a nightbird called. No music, no voices, no television. Only one smell drifted clearly through the gap butter. Brown sugar. Vanilla. Real cookies. He pushed the door. The house was darker than usual, only the kitchen and hallway lights on. The moment he stepped inside, he heard the deadbolt slide home behind him. Click! Gavin spun on instinct, shoulders already locked. Sabrina stood right there. She wore a thin cream sweater and dark skirt hair, loose around her shoulders as if she had not had time to pin it up. Her face still carried the calm, elegant mask the outside world saw in boardrooms. But her eyes were different. Too sharp, too cold, too tired. The eyes of someone who had not slept more than a few hours and many nights, because something was following her. "You came fast," she said. "You wrote cookies," Gavin answered, voice low. "I know what that means." This time Sabrina smiled, but the smile only moved her mouth. It never reached her eyes. "I knew you would." Gavin took one step closer. "Why is the door open?" She looked away for half a second. "It wasn't an accident. Anyone else Here. No one. Her voice dropped. But someone has parked at the bottom of the hill for 3 nights straight. Last night there was a handprint on the back door. This morning someone logged into my supplier portal without permission. Gavin looked straight at her. Who? Sabrina opened her phone and held the screen toward him. A single anonymous text glowed against the black background niece house. Hope it's still yours by the weekend. He lifted his gaze. Name. She answered without hesitation this time. Trent Holloway. The name landed like a piece of cold iron. Trent Holloway was the real estate developer who had been chasing Vale Crest for nearly a year, offering to buy the eastern slope of the vineyard for a luxury resort. Sabrina had refused every time. After that, the bank started dragging their feet. Her CFO quit suddenly and quiet. Questions began appearing about her ability to manage the estate. Gavin scanned the kitchen, the tray of cookies still warm on the island, the open laptop, the untouched coffee, then looked back at Sabrina. Don't go outside anymore, he said, each word clear. Stay inside. And right then she knew he had not driven up the hill just to listen and leave. He had come to stand on the line with her. Gavin did the first thing he always did when stepping into a situation that smelled of danger. He checked the space. No questions yet, no comfort, no stupid words like, everything will be okay. He took the flashlight from his jacket pocket and walked a full circle through the house. The back door had a thin pry mark at the edge of the lock as if someone had tested it with a thin metal tool. On the back porch there was a streak of dried mud that did not match the red soil around the vineyard. Down the eastern slope, even in the fading light, he could see a cigarette butt near the fence. Someone had stood there for quite a while. When he returned to the kitchen, Sabrina was leaning against the island, both hands flat on the marble as if letting go would reveal how tired she really was. Does anyone else know you texted me to come here? He asked. No. Have you called the police yet? No. Why? Sabrina lifted her eyes. Because if I call them too early, Trent will say I'm creating drama to get the bank's attention. If I call too late, he'll say I can't control my own property. She breathed in slowly. People like him don't need to burn my house down. They just need everyone else to think I'm losing control. Gavin looked at her for a few seconds. That's why you texted about cookies. Yes? Not because you wanted me to come for dinner. Sabrina's lips twitched. If you're good, I'll still feed you. The joke was small, but it was enough to tell him she was holding on to anything that kept her from falling apart. Gavin opened the cutlery drawer, found a screwdriver, and started removing the faceplate of the back door lock. I'm staying tonight, he said. Sabrina looked at him directly. You have a daughter. Lila is at my sister's tonight. You don't have to do this. Gavin did not look up. You've said that 3 times now. Because it's true. No. He tightened the last screw. What's true is that someone is testing how you react. And tonight I'm not letting him know you're here alone. Sabrina stayed quiet. A minute later, she slid the tray of cookies toward him. Eat. I'm not hungry. That wasn't an invitation. Gavin looked up. For the first time since he had walked in, he saw something very human in her. Not exploding fear, but the exhausted despair of someone who had been holding herself together too long. He took one cookie. It was still warm, soft in the middle. Smelled of butter and brown sugar. He chewed slowly and said, Good. Sabrina nodded and her face looked a little younger for a moment. I don't bake when I'm happy. When I need my hands busy so I don't smash something else. Gavin knew that feeling. After Naomi died, he had rebuilt the entire backyard fence in one night, just to give his hands something to do besides shake. By midnight, they were sitting at the long dining table that overlooked the valley, surrounded by files, laptops, and 2 cold cups of coffee. Sabrina showed him the emails, the call logs, the bank notices, the supplier portal logs. Gavin drew a timeline on a sheet of paper: CFO resignation, bank pressure, surveillance cars, data breach, anonymous threats. Everything fit together too neatly to be random. Trent isn't just threatening, Gavin said. He's building a story that makes the bank freeze your credit line. If they do that, Sabrina said quietly, the next harvest dies. So we don't give them that story. She looked at him across the table. We, he capped the pen. If I already drove up here for cookies, then it's we now. Sabrina did not answer right away. Then, very slowly, she nodded. Outside the big glass doors, darkness covered the rows of vines. Somewhere at the bottom of the hill, a car might still be waiting. But for the first time in many nights, Sabrina did not have to listen to that silence alone. And neither did Gavin. The next 3 days passed like a quiet campaign. Gavin called his supervisor and requested unpaid leave for family matters. No one pressed for details. A widowed father raising a young daughter alone always received that kind of space. Gavin was used to it. It was convenient, even if it tasted bitter sometimes. Every morning he dropped Lila at school, then drove up the hill to Sabrina's house. In the evenings he picked up his daughter from his sister and returned if needed. The elegant estate was no longer just a luxury home. Under his hands it became a soft fortress, new deadbolts, longer screws in the hinges. Security cameras adjusted for better angles. Timed lights. Completely changed alarm codes. Sabrina ran the vineyard while working alongside him on the data. She operated with a terrifying calm. No complaints, no shouting. She simply slept even less. One Wednesday afternoon, Gavin was kneeling on the porch replacing a sensor when he saw a gray sedan crawling up the slope with deliberate slowness. It did not enter the gate. It stopped halfway up the drive long enough to see the house, then turned around. Sabrina stood at the glass door watching. She did not panic, but her hand holding the coffee cup went white. That's not the same car as before, she said. No. Gavin wiped his hands on his jeans. He switched people. What does he want next? Gavin watched the car disappear behind the trees. Not pictures anymore. Why? Because pictures only work if you deny them. He stepped inside and closed the door. Now he knows you're building a file. He'll move to creating real incidents so the bank backs away on its own. Sabrina leaned against the kitchen counter. In other words, make you look like someone who can't control her own home. The next morning, the next push arrived. The bank emailed a notice of an urgent operational safety and management capability review scheduled for Friday. Less than 48 hours away. The risk manager's voice on the phone was polite to the point of ice. We just need to verify a few concerns. Sabrina hung up and stood still at the window for a long time. If they freeze the credit right now, I'm finished, she said. We're not finished, Gavin corrected. She turned to him. Do you know what the worst part is? What I'm starting to hate this house. Her voice cracked at the end. It used to be the only place I still felt my parents. Now every night I only see blind spots, locks, glass doors, footprints, worst-case scenarios. Gavin was not good at comfort, but he understood loss when it attached itself to a house and turned every familiar object into proof of pain. After Naomi died, their old kitchen had nearly driven him insane because her favorite mug still sat by the sink for 2 months. The house didn't betray you, he said. He did this. Sabrina stared at him as if he had just handed her a key she had needed for a long time without knowing its name. That night, the back door alarm gave one small beep at 11:17. Gavin was already up before the sound faded. He ran down the stairs, barefoot, flashlight and phone in hand. Sabrina was already in the hallway, hair loose, robe thrown on. "Don't go outside," he said immediately. "It's my house, and that's an order." The way he said it stopped her cold. Gavin moved to the back door. He did not open it. He shone the light through the small side pane. A shadow slipped past the corner of the porch. Fast. Too fast to identify clearly, but he saw the gloves. Sabrina handed him her phone. No signal. Of course not. He pulled her back gently. "Kitchen. Stay low." The back door rattled with a faint click like someone testing a thin tool in the lock gap. Not a burglar. Not an amateur. This was a hired hand testing limits. Gavin flipped on the porch, light yanked the inner safety bolt, and shouted in the voice that had once commanded men, "I see you. Get off the porch. Now." Footsteps ran, a muffled curse, then silence. Sabrina stood behind him, her hand gripping his elbow hard enough to bruise. "Do you think he's gone?" "Not sure." Gavin turned and looked straight at her. "But tonight he won't try a second time." When the phone signal returned 5 minutes later, the county sheriff's deputies arrived to photograph the pry marks. No successful entry, no injuries. Just another mark on the chart Gavin was keeping. After they left, the kitchen floor was covered with broken cookie pieces because Sabrina had dropped the tray when she ran to the hallway. She bent to pick them up, hands shaking. "Don't," Gavin said, kneeling in front of her to gather the shards. "I'll do it. You don't have to do everything." "Yes," he answered without looking up. "Because you clearly won't let yourself fall apart. So someone has to handle the rest." Sabrina stood still and watched him for a long moment. And right then, between the scattered crumbs and the soft kitchen light, she realized the most frightening thing was no longer Trent Holloway or the bank. It was how much she was starting to need this man. Friday morning arrived in a cold, tired haze. Low clouds, dry wind. The rows of vines outside the window stood silent as if waiting for judgment. Gavin woke on the living room sofa, back aching from nearly a week of sleeping in a position ready to jump. Sabrina was already in the kitchen, hair pulled back, neatly, white blouse, black trousers. Not because she had slept well, because women like her were taught to never look like someone who had just walked through hell. She set a plate of toast and eggs in front of him. "Eat." "I can't swallow anything. If you pass out in the middle of the meeting, I will actually kill you." Gavin picked up the fork. It still felt strange that a woman 100 times richer than him, owner of an entire vineyard and a private legal team, was standing there watching him eat breakfast in her own kitchen. But over the past week, too many lines that should have stayed clear had blurred. Sabrina knew. Lila liked hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Gavin knew. She could not sleep if the left corner of the curtain was not pulled tight. She knew he rolled up his sleeves when he was worried. He knew she baked cookies whenever she needed her hands too busy to break something else. The bank review was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the conference room overlooking the processing plant. 2 risk managers arrived on time, accompanied by an operations consultant. They were polite, clean, and dangerous precisely because of that. The kind of people who could destroy an empire with the phrase, "We are not comfortable yet." Gavin sat to Sabrina's right. No security uniform, just a dark blue shirt and a folder of papers already worn at the edges. He presented the timeline clearly, briefly, without drama. Trent's calls to the bank coinciding with the CFO's sudden resignation surveillance vehicles appearing supplier portal breach. Backdoor tampering police reports, increased patrol logs. Sabrina handled the rest cash flow statements, inventory records, supply contracts, harvest projections, staffing contingency plans. One of the risk managers looked straight at Gavin. "What exactly is your role in Ms. Vale's organizational structure?" The question cut like a blade. Not because it was difficult, because it touched the thinnest place between them. Gavin glanced at Sabrina. She looked back at him. Just for a fraction of a second. But in that glance was everything. Money, class, distance, status, reputation, everything the world outside could see when it looked at him and said a security guard did not belong here. He answered before she had to rescue him. "I am an invited compliance and risk advisor assisting during this review period." Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. The meeting ended nearly 2 hours later. The bank made no firm promises, but their tone had changed. No longer accusatory, only cautious. When the door closed and they were alone, Sabrina leaned both hands on the edge of the table and closed her eyes. "You should not have had to answer that question." "But I did." She opened her eyes. "And I hate that you felt you needed to." Gavin looked through the glass wall at the vines shining under the midday sun. "Do you think I don't know what people see when they look at us standing next to each other?" Sabrina stayed silent. "You are the wealthy CEO of a family estate with hundreds of acres. I'm a single father working security, still paying off an old truck and counting every dollar to see if there's enough left for Lila's swim lessons at the end of the month." He gave a small, bitter smile. "The world out there doesn't look at the truth. It looks at the distance." Sabrina walked around the table until she stood close. "Then the world out there is stupid. Not always harmless, just because it's stupid." "What are you afraid of?" she asked directly. Gavin did not answer right away. Then he told the truth. That when this is over, you'll look at me the same way they do. That during the crisis I was useful. But afterward, he shrugged. "Afterward, I'm just the poor guard who stood in the wrong place." Sabrina looked at him for a long time. No anger, no pity. Just looking. Then she took one more step close enough that she did not need to raise her voice. "Do you want to know what I see?" Gavin stayed still. "I see the first person who doesn't treat me like something to own or save from myself. I see the man who stood at my back door at 11 o'clock at night and said, 'Don't go outside,' in a voice that made me listen. I see the man my daughter talks about with a light in her eyes I haven't seen in a child for a long time." She touched his wrist lightly with one finger. "I don't see you standing in the wrong place." Those words broke the last piece of armor he had been holding. Gavin leaned forward until their foreheads touched for one brief second. He breathed in the smell of coffee paper and her faint perfume. "You're making everything harder. So are you." And then her phone vibrated. A new message appeared on the screen. "If you think you've won, come to the East Gate. Alone. Trent." They both stared at the words. Sabrina looked up. He's desperate now. Gavin took his truck keys from his pocket. "Good. What are you going to do?" He looked straight at her. His voice was low, certain, and left no room for argument. "Stay inside. Don't go outside." The east gate of Vale Crest lay nearly half a mile from the main house down a narrow dirt road that wound past the barrel storage sheds and the slope overlooking the dry creek bed. Gavin drove his old pickup there before calling the county sheriff. He was not trying to be a hero. But he knew one thing: men like Trent always wanted their opponent to step into the passive position. Gavin was no longer playing by that rule. Trent Holloway's black Range Rover was already parked there. Trent leaned against the door, sleeves rolled up, sunglasses pushed into his hair, even though the light was fading. The man was handsome in the calculated way. Easy smile, sharp jaw, expensive watch shoes that never stayed dirty long. To Gavin, he was just another predator in a suit, the kind that destroyed homes with paperwork pressure and reasonable offers. Sending the woman to hide behind a security guard is a new strategy, Trent asked as Gavin stepped out. Gavin closed the truck door without hurry. I didn't tell her to hide, he said. I told her to stay inside. Trent smiled. You know what the problem with men like you is? Too much free time, so we like listening to guys like you talk. Trent ignored it. You think doing the right thing at the right moment makes the world rearrange itself? But this place... He waved a hand at the vineyard, the sheds, the slope, the pale gold sky. This place runs on money credit and power, not the loyalty of a single father working night shifts. The words should have hurt more, but they didn't, because Gavin had heard enough people judge him by paycheck and bank balance his whole life. Naomi had once told him the only thing that made him dangerous was that he knew who he was, even when others tried to tell him he was less. You're wrong, Gavin said. It runs on who's still willing to look at the truth. Trent stepped closer. The truth is, the bank is doubting. The truth is, she's alone on that hill trying to protect an asset she doesn't have the strength to hold. The truth is, you're just the man she called when she panicked. Gavin narrowed his eyes. And you're just the man who can't believe someone will stay when he's not being paid. At that moment, the sound of county sheriff vehicles began climbing the hill in the distance. Trent noticed first. He looked toward the road, his mouth tightening. You called them. You texted her to come here alone. I thought more people should hear it. Trent no longer smiled. You just helped her win one round. Don't think that's enough. No, Gavin replied. But it's enough to start a file on obstruction and threats. 2 sheriff cars stopped a few dozen feet away. The deputy got out, asked short questions, noted the message, the license plate, the time, the location. Trent immediately switched to his polite voice, saying he only wanted a good faith conversation. Gavin did not argue. He let the deputy read the text, match the send time, and write it into the report. Men like Trent hated things that went on official paper. When it was done, Trent got into his car without another word. But before he closed the door, he looked at Gavin. She won't choose you in the real world. Gavin simply stood and watched the car turn around. The words followed him all the way back to the main house. Sabrina was standing on the porch when he drove up. She had not obeyed completely. She had not gone to the gate. But she waited outside, arms wrapped around herself, as if that was the only way to stay calm. When she saw Gavin step out unharmed, her shoulders finally lowered a little. I told you to stay inside, he said. I stayed on the property. Nice technicality. You're back. 3 words that made every tension in Gavin suddenly ease in a way he had not prepared for. They went inside. Sabrina opened the oven. Another tray of cookies was keeping warm. She set it on the island, and the smell of butter and vanilla quickly filled the room like the first night he had come. But today it no longer felt like a distress signal. It felt like a ritual, something that now belonged to the 2 of them. The bank called while you were gone, Sabrina said. They are not freezing the credit line. They are opening an independent investigation into Trent's complaints and contacts. Gavin let out a slow breath. So, his big move is over. The small moves aren't yet. She looked at him. But this time he has to play in the open. They stood across the island for a few seconds. Outside, the last sunlight poured gold over the vines. Inside, there was only the smell of cookies, the soft hum of the air conditioning, and the breathing of 2 people who had just walked through enough tension to change anything still unsaid. Sabrina broke a cookie in half and handed him one piece. The first time I texted about cookies, she said it was because I was too scared to write that I was afraid. Gavin took it. I know. This time. She hesitated so quietly, it was almost foreign on the woman who never hesitated in boardrooms. This time, I just wanted you to come home. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, I'll come home, he said, even when there is no crisis, especially when there is no crisis. Sabrina walked around the island and stood in front of him. No more guarded eyes. No more steel, armor. Just a woman who had gone too long without letting anyone close enough to hear her heart change. I don't want this to exist only because of danger, she said, very softly. It doesn't. Gavin touched her hair, sliding his fingers through the soft strands at the nape of her neck. Danger was just what stopped us from lying anymore. You always make the last line sound like a nail in wood, don't you? Occupational habit. She smiled, then lifted her face. The kiss this time held no adrenaline, no rush, only certainty. The certainty of two people who had stood together through threats, bank files, pride locks, sleepless nights, and had finally chosen not to run. When they pulled apart, Sabrina rested her forehead against his chest. "What kind of cookies does Lila like?" she asked. "Chocolate chip. But she'll judge you if they're too hard." "Good." Sabrina slipped her arms around his waist. "I hate being judged by adults. Kids are more forgiving." Gavin laughed, then looked past her shoulder through the glass door. The sky was darkening over the vineyard. No strange car waited at the bottom of the hill anymore. No sharp fear pulsed like the first night he had come here. Only one simple truth remained. She had texted, "I baked cookies. Come over." He had come, and he had said, "Stay inside. Don't go outside." At first, it had been an order to keep her safe. In the end, it was also the quiet promise he was making to his own heart. Stay. Don't run. Maybe this time something worth keeping was really here to stay.